Hey there, everyone, and welcome back to another video. This one's going to be about the full moon in Taurus. It's going to be maybe a bit of a doozy. Before I get into it, though, I just want to say thank you. Thank you to everyone who's been subscribing to the channel, watching my videos, commenting, and sharing them as well. I really do appreciate it. It means a lot to have you here, and I really do hope that you're enjoying what I'm putting out here. Um, I'd also like to make a quick announcement. Today's the 14th of November, and next week on Saturday, the 23rd, I'm going to be delivering a 1 day in-person workshop here in Brisbane, all about the astrology of 2025. So we're going to have a fun, intense day, probably followed by some dinner and drinks for those who'd like to hang out afterwards. I'll leave a link in the description below where you can find out more details about that if you're in Brisbane or you can get to Brisbane. Now, I realize most of you probably aren't, which is cool because probably in about 10 days' time, I'm going to be announcing a webinar on the astrology of 2025. So that will be a bit more of a condensed version of the material that I'm going to be delivering next week. So if you're really keen for all the heads up on 2025, that will be coming soon. It's something I've been doing every year for several years now. So hopefully you can join me for that. So this full moon in Taurus is going to have an element of change, chaos, friction, and instability. Reason being that this, lots of reasons, but one of the reasons is firstly, from an astronomical perspective, this is classed as a supermoon. So a supermoon is super because it's closer to Earth than usual. So the moon will have its range of distance on the Earth, or from the Earth, I should say, in its orbit. And this one is on the closer end of the spectrum to Earth than the regular pathway. We've had a lot of supermoons this year, and something that a lot of people have been reporting is really feeling the intensity of them or feeling the energy of them. And if you think about it, the moon is the closest celestial body to Earth. She rules all animate objects, our bodies, the tides, the tectonic plates of the Earth, all of those sorts of things. So when she's close, those things are going to be stimulated as such. So we're going to experience the ups and downs, the ebbs and flows that the moon does represent. When it comes to a full moon, it is the peak of the lunation cycle. And so full moons tend to bring a pivotal turning point, particularly because it's the end of the waxing cycle and the beginning of the waning cycle. So the turning point often means turning away from something and then turning toward something else. So it could be towards something or someone. Full moons can be a culmination point, a decision, a sense of clarity. The moon being full, she's as bright as she's going to get. And so every month we have a full moon in a different house in our birth chart, bringing an awareness, an attention, a focus to a part of our charts that for some, we might have a lot of Taurus planets and it's just more Taurus. For others, we may have none. And it might be a corner of our chart that, okay, this is my annual check-in into this area of life. So the full moon can suggest a change in direction. This could be a change of mood, a change of thought, and also in some aspects like a bright light. Okay, there's clarity now. I can see something for what it is, and I can either like it or I can lump it. But when we've got clarity, we got something to work with, even if that means we don't necessarily like what we see. Now, this is a full moon in Taurus. Taurus is a sign that I can't stress enough loves stability. This would be, this would be a massive segue, and I'm not going to go there, but that's also one of the reasons we could say that the sign of Taurus exalts the moon, because the moon represents nourishment, care, the physical needs, the financial needs, the emotional needs. The three things that are really important is food and shelter, comfort and belonging. And the moon really represents those things. And we really do want those things to be stable, Taurus, and solid, dependable, reliable. Generally speaking, we like a very steady and abundant flow of cash. We like to know that we can go to our fridge and our cupboards and pantries and things and know that the supplies are there. If you have planets in Taurus like me, well, that's definitely the case. So, the Taurus is about stuff that we actively want to hold on to, that we don't like change around, and we hold it dear. We'll dig our heels in kind of thing, rather than change something. This full moon peaks at 24 Taurus, and it's very, very close to Uranus, who's at 25 at the current minute, the current time. In contrast to the sign of Taurus, Uranus is about chaos. It's about change. It's about freedom and liberation. It's about anything other than Taurus, pretty much. It's about awakenings. It's about revolutions and rebellions. There's a couple of phrases that I want to share with you. When I started really thinking about Taurus, so Uranus and Taurus back in 2017, I was starting to write articles for it. And I just kept on thinking about one of my probably up there in my favorite songs, and I got a lot of them, and that was Corduroy by Pearl Jam. Funnily enough, they played in my city last night down at the Gold Coast, and one of their songs, Corduroy, push me and I will resist. This behavior's not unique. And this idea of Uranus in Taurus, it's pushing that bull, it's goading that bull and really goading it to take action, to make change. Now, that is a daunting prospect to the energy of Taurus, but sometimes it's not until you give something a try, you give something a go, you add that firework, that spark, that novelty that Uranus also really likes, then you might think to yourself, that actually wasn't too bad. And I have to admit, I can be one of those people. I can be reluctant to try new things. But when I do, I'm usually, oh, wow, that was pretty good. Often it's a bit of a mind over matter situation in many respects. Another idea I really think about Uranus and Taurus, and of course, this full moon is just peaking that, is the idea of another phrase I really enjoy, and that is not all storms come to disrupt us. Some of them come to clear the path. It's really important to remember that change is inevitable. There is no resisting it. Well, you can, but you're not going to get far. So sometimes it can just be really helpful to maybe not welcome it as such, but at least get used to the idea of it, not fearing it, not seeing it as an enemy, or not something to use huge amounts of effort in order to resist it, because you can't. So there is this sense here with the full moon on Uranus, is that change is coming. Okay. If you've looked at the astrology of 2025, if you've looked at the astrology of the rest of this decade, I mean, uh, change is here, and we get these little lunations, well, not little lunations, but we get these lunations that start prompting us, that start inviting us to go, okay, where in my life am I a little bit stuck? Am I a little bit stagnant? Where am I entertaining the idea of change, but maybe there's some self-sabotaging beliefs coming in. Maybe there's some limiting beliefs. Oh, I could never do that, or I can't have this, or whatever the story is. The idea too with Uranus and Taurus is that this one comes from my dear friend Gordon White, over in Soup, if you're part of that community, is sometimes the biggest risk is to not take one at all. So I will invite you to look at your Taurus house. If you've got any planets or points around 24 of the fixed signs in particular, this is going to be a lunation to pay attention to. What in your life do you need to change a bit? Um, do you need to change something literally, metaphorically, or idealistically? There could be many, many things. So, with all that being said, let's take a look at the chart. So I've got this chart for my time zone, my location, which is Brisbane. So don't pay too much attention to the houses at this point. We're just going to be looking at the planetary positions. So the sun is 24 degrees of Scorpio, and the moon is at 24 of Taurus, full moon. So this is really activating the Taurus Scorpio axis, which really is about resources primarily. It's the have not. It's the emotional resources in Scorpio and then the physical resources in Taurus. So obviously the emphasis is on Taurus because the moon is full. If it was a new moon, we'd be focusing it back to Scorpio a little bit more. So this is a full moon that is activating the physical resources. So food, finance, agriculture. On a mundane level, the moon represents the people. It's the mood of the people. And conjoined Uranus, maybe we could say they're a little agitated. They're ready for change, or they're maybe there's plenty of people out there that are not too happy with recent changes. But there is this sense that things are building, things are starting to reach a tipping point. And we have had some quite significant hits when we talk about these degrees of Taurus so far this year. So before I get into the rest of this chart, let's have a look at some of the stuff that's already been happening in this area of the zodiac this year. So back in April, we had the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, and from memory, I think that was 22 degrees. So this full moon is setting that off. So the roughly sort of 21 to 26 degrees of Taurus, give or take, has been what would I call a hotspot range or a hotspot degrees so far, or for the majority, obviously, of 2024. So the month of, or I should say the year of April of 2024, because it felt like that, we had the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. We had a solar eclipse. We had a Mercury retrograde. It was massive. Now, I have had a little bit of a look at some of the stuff that happened that month. And I just want to share some of that with you to refresh your memory, because sometimes we go back and look at, what was in the news or what was happening, and we think, God, was it only then? It feels like so much longer ago. So in short, it was in late March. So I think Jupiter was at about 15 Taurus, Uranus was at 20. So they're starting to get closer. Usually we would see a degrees of engagement, 3 degrees, but with bigger planets like Jupiter and Uranus, you can give them a little bit more leeway. And particularly when you're talking more mundane sort of matters to do with weather, countries, politics, and stuff like that, you could even stretch that a little bit further. Point being, it was the end of March that Kamala says, I've studied all the maps. So related to the Israel Palestinian situation. Then just a few weeks later, maybe 2 weeks later, uh, Bibi announces he's going into the area where he was told not to go. And, the results speak for themselves in terms of military strategy. Now, we also had some other disruptions with finances, quite a lot actually. So I don't recall these during my time in the US, so maybe they're only in some states. 99-cent stores. They all closed down apparently. You might know more about that than I do. The video games people, Epic Games, they laid off nearly 1,000 staff members, which is 1/6 of their workforce. And there was another video games company that did the same thing, Take-Two or something like that it was called. Interestingly, two countries in this month, which have been, I guess we could say, sort of hotspot countries, increased their military budgets. The first one to do that in the month of April was the Netherlands. That since recently, that's been a problematic situation there. And they increased their military budget by 2%. And they hadn't increased their military budget in 30 years, apparently. And then the UK, I'm increasing it 2.5. So that tracks when we think about those longer term cycles that are happening this decade. We had Iran. What was that? Iran attacked and its proxies, all those missiles straight into uh, Israel, unheard of. We also here in Australia, we had two stabbings, one in Westfield's Bondi Junction, and another one was on a bishop in a church. So that's big stuff here in this country, at least. Tesla also announced a 10% cut of its global workforce. Um, Interesting too, Israel banned the news company Al Jazeera. I point that out because it's interesting that the banning of news, banning of access to information, whether you agree with it, whether you don't, that's irrelevant. But that's a big part of what's happening in Australia too at the moment. Lots and lots of floodings. We had the floods sort of everywhere, something that touches my tender heart. I had so many messages about Taylor Swift's new album because she has a song called Cassandra, and thanks for the tip, but I won't be listening to that. Cybertrucks. So we're thinking about Uranus and um, innovation and technology, and a whole bunch of them got recalled. So that was really interesting. Again, on so sometimes what happens is we get these hits, these news situations, and if you're watching transits and you're watching the news, you can watching news cycles, I should say, you start to get a thread or a theme, and then you can start to see activation points in the cycles. So, the US sent another $95 billion in military aid overseas. We had laws in America passed that have the capacity to sell or ban TikTok. So again, the idea of information, Pluto in Aquarius, Uranus in Gemini. So these things are starting to heat up if you can see that, if you can follow that. There's a whole lot of other things going on. I don't, that was back in April. That was a big month, but you can always Google it, news in April 2024. July, we probably the two big things in July. So we had another activation point at these degrees, and that was Mars and Uranus. And the big news there was Donald Trump was shot. And what else? We had that big hurricane in the US, Hurricane Beryl, and I think there might have been more that came along with that. So it just gives you a little bit of an idea of how these hotspots or these activation points can bring some repetition of theme, and we can start to, what these things do is they paint a picture of what this full moon can bring to light, can bring to fruition, can bring clarity around. Because when we're talking about the axis of Taurus and Scorpio, we're also thinking the idea of secrets and scandals and things that are hidden. And when something's hidden is brought to light, well, some people are really going to want to protect that, aren't they? And that's a big part of what we're starting to see now. All right, so that's the lunation. I showed that already, but we're looking at it again. And so we've got the conjunction of the full moon and Uranus. So when we're analyzing full moons, we really want to look at what the ruler is doing. So the ruler is Venus. Venus is newly in Capricorn. She's not aspecting the lunation as such. She's kind of flying free and easy here right now. She's not making any aspects to anything particularly notable. One thing that is definitely a thing, though, is that she is making a square to the nodes. So this is going to be again, I won't talk about this part too much. It's again one of those things I could go on a massive segue on, but it is this idea of again turning points, favoring one direction over another one, moving to something and away from something else, which is what full moons can also show us. Venus is also, she is ruled by Saturn, and Saturn is stationing. So this is kind of things that have been maybe bubbling to the surface, things have that have been playing out since about June. Just want to check that it was June. Yep, June, that's Saturn stationed retrograde. So we've had a good sort of 4 months or so of Saturn moving in reverse. And now it's coming back. So you might want to think about the month of June and what pigeons, so to speak, are coming home to roost in a particular area of your life. And so the full moon is just going to sort of bring all this up and out. So that's something to factor in too. When we think about the lunation in of itself, it is making a relatively tight aspect to Pluto and Capricorn. Pluto and Capricorn is by this time next week will be ancient history. And I'm sure there's probably many of you out there that are very happy to hear that. And then there's other people of you out there that are going, no, don't want it to go into Aquarius. So this is sort of highlighting that this exit of Pluto in Capricorn isn't going to go out uh, without a bang. Okay. If we think about what Pluto in Capricorn in particular symbolizes, it's, power. Well, Pluto is, power, control, it's manipulation. It is the idea of power and empowerment, and also the idea of disempowering or disempowerment. Pluto is that uh, coming out with a Tool song now. It's like being dragged into the undertow, and then then you popped back up out in the current. And so, Pluto is that idea of being initiated into maybe a sort of fairly traumatic experience and coming out the other side. Stronger and better than ever. A little bit like Sansa from Game of Thrones, if you ever watched that show, which feels like forever ago now. What's really interesting is that as far as our Capricorn houses are concerned, we've sort of got this buffering influence, the exit of a planet that I think we could all agree on is fairly malefic, and then Venus being a benefic, sort of bookending that. So it feels like there's almost a buffer there because she's the planet that's ruling this lunation too. So Pluto in Capricorn, if you can recall when Pluto first went into Capricorn, when a planet and like these big planets, the slow movers, when they enter a sign and when they exit a sign, will often be when they show up their most intense. Like we're going to, it's like, ta-da, like this is what I'm all about. Or, there's no hiding it. I'm Pluto, I'm here now. It's that initiation point. And that, collectively was the global financial crisis. And so it really, set off this idea of the CEO, globalization, and the idea of this consolidation of power, of wealth, of government, everything becoming very like uber centralized, and the centralization of power and wealth. The idea of Capricorn is kind of like stacking compounding interest or stacking cash, but it's a top down or a top up. It's more of a vertical type of idea. If you look at maps of any capital city with all the vertical buildings, right? And then as you kind of go out into the suburbs and the countryside and the villages, that's when it gets dispersed. The resources, the wealth, the density of population as well. And that's where we're moving into. So Pluto in Pluto in Aquarius is more about that dispersing and the decentralization of all the things that Pluto and Capricorn represents. However, if you are, on Team Global, or if you're on the, if you've got a lot to benefit from Pluto and Capricorn, you're not going to want to hand that mantle of power over without a fight, right? And this is what we're seeing a lot collectively, particularly here in this southern island. Yeah, but that's a whole nother story. You know, controlling information, controlling movement, controlling the dispersion. I've actually done a video of Pluto and Aquarius. I might link that as well so you can understand a little bit more about that from a global level. So, yeah, so this idea of Uranus and Pluto being a big part of this signature of the lunation, the full moon is lighting up Uranus, and then together they're trining Pluto. They're going to shine light on the things that are hidden, the secrets, the all of these sorts of things. Now, you can take all of these ideas and these concepts and personalize it into your own birth chart, you know, looking at the houses of Taurus and Capricorn in particular. And it might be as we cross the threshold of Pluto and Capricorn forever and into Pluto and Aquarius for the next 20 years, it might be, you know, how do you need to change or what do you need to change in your life? Do you need to start changing in ways that you didn't think you'd need to change? Because Pluto and Uranus is going to, what do I keep saying Pluto and Uranus? Pluto in Aquarius is going to bring so much change. And some of that is on initially is going to be pretty brutal. It's not going to be friendly, peace, love, and brown rice. It's going to be harsh. If you think about what Saturn in Aquarius first brought, it wasn't happiness and good times, right? It was dark. And so we are going to experience that collectively for a period of time. So in the meantime, you know, it is what do you need to change? What do you need to embrace? What do you need to think differently about? Maybe what do you need to take a little bit of a risk on? And usually, this sort of almost an anxiety that can be coming through with a full moon on Uranus trining Pluto, it is sort of this fear of the future. And there's a lot of that as well coming through with Pluto and Aquarius. You know, we can look at the past and think, yeah, let's make it great again. But you know, there's that idea of is your idea of making something great again the same as somebody else's, right? And so, what we need to do with this particular lunation is start to think about our own relationship to the future and how much do we change? How much do we stay the same? And if we are feeling a little bit either low level or high level anxiety around change and all these outer planets moving forward, maybe a change of government, and all the sorts of things that are changing in the collective. All these big supermoons for this year are really sort of building tension and things of that nature as well. If we are thinking about, you know, what do we do with money, with finances, and, you know, all the things that are changing in the world, you know, oftentimes the idea of anxiety is worrying about the future and paying a debt on that, and you're not even sure that you need to worry about it. So look at your personal life. You know, what is it that you're concerned about? What is it that you're worried about? What are you actively resisting? And can you embrace it? Can you just decide that you're going to be okay regardless of what happens? And so we also need to be in these really turbulent times when there's a lot of negativity around change. We need to sort of energetically protect ourselves a little bit as well. And so when it comes to a full moon in Taurus, it might be good to bask underneath it, walk on the grass a little bit, and remember, you know, as cliche as it can be sometimes, um, this too shall pass. But change is coming. So the first thing to do is embrace it, accept it, and find a way to enjoy the ride. So I could talk about this full moon for a long time, but I hope that gave you some insights into it, how you can navigate this space, and how you can also reflect on the Pluto and Capricorn story and the fact that the ruler of the lunation, Venus, she's kind of buffering and bookending. She's sort of ushering Pluto out, and that's kind of nice. But she's ruling the new moon, oh, sorry, the full moon on Uranus. So there's this idea is she's saying, okay, we need to change something. We need to do something a little bit different. But once Pluto's gone, we'll probably see exactly what that might be. All right, everyone, I hope you have a very gentle full moon. It's going to be a big one, and I'd love to hear how you're feeling about it in the comments below.